Thank you for joining us for the Envision Jamestown Community Survey Results presentation. As part of our initial community engagement, a survey was distributed to develop a baseline of information about a variety of topics that will influence the plan. The survey was available online from April 15th until June 15th. The town advertised the survey on its website, the Envision Jamestown website, and on banners at Town Hall. The town also made a direct mailing to all residences in Jamestown to help spread the word about the survey. With 580 individual responses, we feel that this was a successful effort and we gained significant insight into the community from the responses. Of the 580 responses, 425, or 75%, were from residents of the town, while just over 10% were residents of the ETJ. Here we see a little more information about the characteristics of the respondents to the survey. You'll see that most of the people who provided a residence location but did not live in town lived in the ETJ. We also had a good number of people who live in High Point or Greensboro take the survey as well. Among Jamestown residents who took the survey, there was a pretty good distribution of length of residence in town. The graph on the right shows that residents in the 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and over 30-year categories were almost evenly represented, while nearly 30% of responses were from residents who had lived here for less than 10 years. The age of respondents who took the survey was weighted somewhat toward older residents, which is reflected somewhat in the length of residence in the community as well, with relatively small numbers of people under the age of 35 taking the survey. Just as an interesting point of reference, we asked for people to tell us the location of their employment if they worked. Greensboro had the highest number of responses, followed by Jamestown and High Point. In this first question about the community, we asked for 3 words or phrases that the respondent would use to describe Jamestown to someone who was unfamiliar with the community. The number 1 response that was given was friendly, and we agree. Rounding out the top 3 were quaint and small town. As the word cloud summary of the responses shows, the responses really all fall in line with those top 3 thoughts and reflect a community that people really love. The next question in the survey asked respondents to tell us which place or physical element that they associated the most with Jamestown. Overwhelmingly, as you might expect, the old high school, which is also the current town library, was cited most often as an iconic symbol of the town. Other responses included the town's parks, town hall, Main Street, historic sites like the Mendenhall Plantation, and key physical elements like the unique brick sidewalks that line the town's streets. Quality of life is defined as the standard of health, comfort, and happiness experienced by an individual or group. We asked about the quality of life experienced in Jamestown, and over 90% of respondents felt that they had a high quality of life living in the community, which is pretty amazing, and reinforces the idea that Jamestown really is a community that is reflective of those qualities that were given as a response to the first question. The next question asked for people to select the top 3 factors that were most important to them about deciding to live in Jamestown. From the list of choices, the top choice was that Jamestown represented a small town option as compared to the larger cities of Greensboro and High Point. Following closely behind that were that Jamestown was in a great location and the historic character and appearance of the community. The choices that received the fewest responses were employment opportunities, the availability of retail options, and entertainment and local events. These responses taken together seem to indicate that when people choose to live in Jamestown, it's a choice based mainly on a desire to live in a small, historic, and high-quality community, and that its location close to larger cities makes up for not having a full range of big city amenities immediately available in town. Regarding the pace of growth and development in Jamestown in recent years, the majority of responses, over 60%, indicated that people felt the amount of growth was just about right. A good share, though, of nearly 30% felt that the community was growing too quickly, while only around 5% felt that the growth was too slow and needed to accelerate. In the next question, we asked respondents to list the 3 primary challenges that the town was facing. This was an open-ended question, and based on our analysis of the responses, answers pertaining to issues related to growth and development were the clear majority, with 376 responses in that category. This was followed by a large number of responses that can be summarized by concerns related to maintaining the small town feel that was cited so often as a reason why people chose to live in Jamestown in the first place. Other response categories that were frequently cited included parking, housing, and traffic. We next asked a question about the types of services or expansion of existing services that might be desired by residents or businesses in Jamestown. A fairly substantial number of responses, nearly 1/4 of the total, stated that no additional services were needed. While a fairly large range of services were cited by respondents, the primary service, or rather a desired change in service that was mentioned, was the town moving to using a standard rollout cart for solid waste collection. In asking our next question, we first noted that while GTCC is not within the town limits, its presence in the larger community has a major influence on Jamestown. We then inquired about ideas that people might have about how to better utilize this major asset to the benefit of residents and the community as a whole. Again, we received a wide range of responses that we categorized by theme. The top 3 categories of responses focused on working with GTCC on community events that could be held on campus, opportunities for adult and continuing education classes, and working with GTCC to promote its presence in the Jamestown community. This next question asked people about their most frequent or usual reason for visiting downtown Jamestown. The top response by far was to visit restaurants. Coming in a fairly distant second and third were shopping, followed closely by visits for business and banking. Following the question about downtown destinations, we next asked people to tell us their primary mode of transportation when they visited downtown Jamestown. The vast majority, over 3/4, indicated that they would usually drive downtown. A fairly substantial minority, just over 15%, said that they usually walk to their downtown destinations. Other modes of transportation, such as biking or taking a rideshare, were cited infrequently in the responses. While the previous question showed that the majority of people usually drove to their downtown destinations, our next question asked about people's perception of the parking situation. Less than 1 out of 5 responses indicated they felt that there was always plenty of parking downtown. Around 1/3 felt that it was often hard to find a place to park, while around 40% indicated that they would usually park at a location outside of downtown and walk to their destination. Finally, less than 8% of respondents responded there was nowhere to park downtown. In a final question about downtown Jamestown, we inquired about improvements that people thought the town should consider to enhance downtown. Not surprisingly, based on responses to previous questions, people most frequently suggested adding more parking options. This was followed closely by a desire to attract new businesses of all types, improving the appearance of existing buildings, making pedestrian and landscaping improvements, and reutilizing vacant properties. These next several questions deal with transportation. The first one asks about people's overall perception of the local transportation network. A small plurality answered that they didn't have any issues traveling around Jamestown, while a slightly smaller number of responses indicated that they felt that while traffic was fine now, there would likely be a need for improvements if the town grows. A much smaller number of people, fewer than 10%, indicated they felt that the traffic situation in town was poor at the current time and they experienced delays while traveling in Jamestown. This next question dives into a bit more detail about the different components that shape people's perception of the transportation network. Specifically, respondents were asked to tell us their perception of traffic safety, traffic congestion, road conditions, and pedestrian and bicycle safety. For each of these categories, a majority felt that conditions were either good or adequate. The single highest response was that road conditions were good. Fewer than 10% of the responses about each component indicated a perception of either below average or poor, with the exception of pedestrian and bicycle safety, where just over 20% indicated it was below average, and a further 6% felt that it was poor. Responses to our next question revealed that, in general, people preferred driving for short trips around town, with around 70% indicating this was their preferred method of travel. Notably, though, nearly a quarter of responses indicated that they preferred walking to driving when they were making a short trip to run an errand or visit with friends in town. When asked about potential transportation improvements, respondents' answers were heavily weighted to desires for the town to build more sidewalks and bike lanes. Other areas for improvement included adding parking, traffic calming, and the enforcement of speed limits, as well as safer pedestrian crossings and adding multi-use paths. We next asked about specific locations that people felt were dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists. The most frequently cited location was Main Street, along with a number of the pedestrian crossings along Main Street, particularly in the downtown area. People cited a need for more sidewalks in general and noted that they felt that bicycling was generally unsafe on most of the major roads in town. Our final transportation-related question inquired about people's perception of the effect that the bypass might have on the community when it is opened. A small plurality felt that the bypass would have a neutral impact, while slightly fewer felt that it would have a positive impact, primarily by reducing the amount of through traffic downtown. A fairly significant number of respondents, around 20%, felt that the opening of the bypass would negatively affect the community. When asked about the most important cultural, historic, and architectural resources in the community, the current Jamestown Library, which is also the original high school that was built in 1915, was cited most frequently. The Mendenhall Plantation was the second most cited, while old buildings and historic sites, as well as downtown in general, received a number of mentions. Interestingly, City Lake Park, which is in High Point, also received a large number of mentions in the responses to this question. We next asked respondents their level of agreement with the following statement. It is important for Jamestown to preserve and protect its historic and cultural resources. Over 75% of survey respondents strongly agreed with this, while nearly another 20% agreed, indicating strong support for these important resources. Our next question asked people to tell us about significant historic sites or buildings that they felt might be in danger of being lost. The most frequently referenced answer was the Oakdale Cotton Mill, followed by the Johnson Farm, the library, and the Potter House. When asked about important environmental and natural resources in the area, parks and greenways were most frequently cited, along with the Deep River, High Point City Lake, and natural areas and green space in general. In this next question, we first note that the Deep River has played a significant role in Jamestown's history, but that there hasn't been much done in recent years to promote or take advantage of this significant natural resource. We then ask respondents if they have any ideas about how the town can take better advantage of its location on the river. The most popular answer to this question was the development of walking trails and picnic areas along the river. Other frequent responses indicate a desire for the town to develop a park on the river and to enhance access for fishing and kayaking. When asked about the amount of land set aside or dedicated for parks and open space, nearly half of respondents felt that not enough land had been dedicated for this purpose, while a slightly smaller share, or around 40%, felt that the current amount was just right. In our final survey question, we asked respondents to describe their vision for Jamestown in the year 2040. What should change? What should stay the same? Our analysis of the responses to this question showed that a significant majority of answers to this question were focused on ensuring that Jamestown maintained its small town feel. Other frequently given responses about the vision for the future included suggestions about controlling or limiting growth, bringing more small businesses to the community, adding more parks and open space, improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and focusing town resources on improving the aesthetic appearance of the community. Thank you again for joining us to review the Envision Jamestown Community Survey results. Please make sure to watch the other presentations and feel free to contact us with any questions you might have.